Do you know that if you have the wrong plants in your garden, it might actually be hurting the environment? The business that we're featuring this week can help you make sure that doesn't happen to you. I'm Josh McEwen, and I'm here with episode 20 of Dufferin Spotlight on Business, where we bring your community to you by letting you know what's available in the area while highlighting the advantages of shopping local. And this week I'm joined by Ian Payne and Vicki Reynolds, the owners of Not So Hollow Farm, which is an indigenous plant nursery located in Mulmer, Ontario. Not So Hollow Farm makes available a wide selection of trees, bushes, and perennials that are native to Dufferin and ethically grown so that the environment actually benefits from what's in your garden. They even have plants you can eat, which is not something I'd recommend with the plants you get from the big box stores. Through Not So Hollow Farm, Vicki and Ian are saving the world one native plant at a time by making their customer service and expertise available to our community. Not So Hollow Farm has a great online presence with their website that includes a ton of information. However, due to the current pandemic situation, in-person shopping at the farm is not possible. As a result, though, they are upping their game by offering online ordering and consulting. So visit notsohollowfarm.ca for more details. You should also check them out on Facebook too. Ian and Vicki, thank you for your time, and you, the audience, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dufferin Spotlight on Business. Hey everyone, so it's Josh McEwen here with Dufferin Spotlight on Business, and today I'm joined by Vicki and Ian of Not So Hollow Farm, which is located in Mulmer, Ontario. How are you guys doing today? Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
We're doing great. Thanks for having us, Josh.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your time. Again, it is greatly appreciated. So, if you guys don't mind, just to start off, can you give us a little bit of a background on yourselves?
I guess to start off with, I'm a landscape architect. I've been practicing for many years. We'll get into it in some of the questions, I guess, but as a landscape architect, I saw a need for native plants. So Vicki and I started the native plant farm in 2003. So yeah, I've just always had a love of plants growing up, so it seemed to be a natural thing. Well, I actually bought the farm years ago as a weekend property.
Oh yeah?
Back in 1983, and I moved here permanently in 2000 when I moved my landscaping business from Toronto.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know, do you want to give some of your background, Vicki?
So it's quite different from Ian's. I'm actually a pastry chef in my past life. So I worked for a catering company in Toronto for almost 20 years. And then I moved northwards. I had a restaurant in Creemore for 5 years with my business partner. And when we decided to move on from that, I was introduced to Ian, and I've always had a love of plants from a personal level. I've always enjoyed gardening a lot. It's my Dutch heritage in me, I think. So anyway, it was just kind of a natural thing for us to do together.
That's great. What is a native plant farm?
So we grow plants that are indigenous to Ontario. We're not specifically in what's called the Carolinian species area, but because of climate change and that type of thing, we limit ourselves to plants that grow in Ontario. We're not Canada-wide, so those would be plants that have grown and evolved here since before European settlement.
Oh, okay.
So those plants, as I said, have grown here for thousands of years. So that's what we specialize in, trees, shrubs, and herbaceous perennials. The herbaceous perennials is more of a recent addition. When we first started, we were strictly wholesale and grew trees and shrubs. But as things have changed and as the interest for native plants has become more and more prevalent, we've decided that it does make sense to grow some of the herbaceous native perennials.
I think some people sometimes think that we have to dig a plant out of the ground to sell it, which we do have another area where we do have some plants in the ground, but all of our plants are in pots. So they're ready to roll. They sit on top of landscape fabric. We have automatic irrigation that waters them every day. So the advantage of plants being in pots is that it's not as sensitive as to when to get them in the ground. If you're selling a bare root plant, then you have to get that. There's only a window. You have to get that plant in a timely fashion, like in the spring. Sometimes in the fall you can do it as well. But because our plants are in pots, you can pop them in any time as long as you are prepared to look after them. If, say, in the middle of the summer there's not as much precipitation. We're open 3 days a week. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or by appointment. The other days of the week, we're off doing landscape contracting and other things, but 3 days a week for the most part from May. So we open May 2nd, and we're always open until the end of October.
Another thing that we encourage people to do, because plants are seasonal, is to come at different times throughout the season to see, what's flowering or what's in leaf, at those times of year. Without having to look it up on the internet or in a book, you can see sort of firsthand and try and put together plant communities that work together throughout the season.
That's great. Do you guys sell direct to consumer?
We do now.
Yeah.
We started a few years ago selling to the public, again, as a need that we saw, because a large portion of our business is education and getting people to learn more about the importance of native plants, biodiversity, and also everybody is getting more and more knowledgeable about the fact that pollinators are in decline, and we need pollinators for our food systems.
But it's not just that, though. It's the fact that everything's interconnected as well. So I know, everybody really focuses on pollinators, but for instance, pollinators are bees, butterflies, but butterflies themselves, they start off to be caterpillars, and caterpillars feed our native birds. So it's not just about the pollinators, it's about the whole food chain, right? And
makes sense, right?
The whole ecosystem that goes on.
Like you said, everything's interconnected. I mean, we all depend on each other. And I mean, especially the species as well. The ecosystem, just like people, they depend on each other.
Yeah, and a lot of these insects, they've evolved with certain plants. So it's not like you can pop in another plant that isn't even from Ontario, because they won't recognize it as being a plant that they've evolved with for food. Or for butterflies need larval hosts, so they need native plants to lay their eggs on. A good example of that are monarchs and milkweeds, right?
Okay.
But there's a lot of other plants that have that same relationship. It's just that monarchs have kind of become the poster child of that specific relationship. But there's a lot of species that are in that same situation. So,
and I think one of the aspects that a lot of people don't necessarily think about is there are certain species, whether that be plants or insects or other animals, that rely on each other as a symbiotic relationship in order to survive. So if you have an insect that relies on that plant, if that plant goes extinct, then that insect will go extinct, or vice versa, or an animal, as I said before.
And then, like you were mentioning before, like bird populations are going to decline, and then everything from there as well. Like, I know you guys have highlighted the relationships already, but it's like, it goes way further. Like, it's important that we do take care of our native species in order to take care of our environment and the things in our environment, including us. So, I mean, even if you're a selfish person, it's in your best interest to look after these things, because you live here too.
And it is noted that, as you mentioned, the bird population is in decline.
Oh, yeah?
But part of the reason the bird population is in decline is because they eat insects. Everybody puts out bird feeders for seed in the wintertime, it's great. It helps them overwinter. But birds have to have insects to feed that protein in order for their brood to fledge and become...
Yeah, in order for them to grow and become adults themselves, right?
That's right.
Yeah, baby birds don't eat birdseed.
Yeah.
Oh, I did see. Yeah.
Yeah. So the adult birds will either feed their young caterpillars, or they'll go out into a meadow and bring back things like crickets,
flies, mosquitoes.
Yeah, because they need that protein.
In winter, that's not there. I mean, the bird feeders are, but like you said, they don't eat birdseed. It's obvious you guys know your stuff. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, I'm learning all kinds of stuff, and it's only been a couple minutes. Like, this is amazing. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think our audience will appreciate it too. So thank you. This is great. So if you don't want me asking, what do you think makes you different from the competition?
I would say our knowledge and our expertise kind of sets us apart from, say, a larger garden center. You know, we have been at this for quite a few years, and we've come up with a line that we feel kind of best describes us. And it's some alliteration, but it's a lot of P's. But we are passionate people perpetually providing provincially propagated pollinator preferred plants for a positive planet.
That's a lot.
That's
a lot
us.
of P's. That's awesome. But that's good. I mean, it tells people exactly what you guys do.
It's our elevator line.
You guys definitely have the knowledge. And like you said, with your competition, you're going to have some garden centers where it's a lot of part-time workers. I mean, I worked in a garden center. It wasn't my full-time duties at that job, but I worked there, and I can tell you, I was zero help to those people. First of all, I was in high school. I wasn't passionate about that. I was just filling a role. And that was pretty much 90% of the people in that job. And I can see that being, I'm not going to say the majority, but a large portion of what you see at the big box garden centers is a bunch of people that don't really know, and they're just there filling a role. Because, I mean, people are just trying to collect a paycheck. And if you're just there doing your job, I get it. I mean, I was there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask anyone for that.
For sure. And, you know, they probably don't have the resources to hire a specialist on native plants, but what we do is pretty specialized, right? So I think more and more garden centers are starting to carry native plants because they see the demand, but they don't necessarily have the infrastructure to be able to, you know, educate and give people advice. In fact, we've had customers come here right after visiting a larger garden center, and they've sort of mentioned what they had been told. And I mean, things like the fact that, you know, a Norway maple, which is a type of maple, is a native maple, and it's certainly not. It's actually considered to be invasive. So just stuff like that, you know, getting the facts wrong or just giving people the wrong advice.
Yeah, so I mean, that is definitely a problem. Especially if you are putting the care into going and getting a native plant, right? Like indigenous plants, because it means you want to kind of help out the environment and perpetuate our native species versus getting something that may be invasive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and a lot of garden centers do still sell invasive plants.
And that's what I was kind of actually overlooking. I forgot about it until you mentioned, but it's your product that also differentiates you guys as well, not just your expertise, which I mean is invaluable. That will set you apart, because I mean, eventually these guys can maybe down the line get the product, but they will never be able to replicate your guys' expertise. That is for sure. They will never be able to, because there's not enough people that have it to satisfy the demand for all their stores. Mm-hmm. So they're never going to try to. They might have somebody at head office that knows something, but that's not going to translate to what the customer experiences most of the time. Hey everyone, this is our first commercial break. We're new, so we'll just take this time to let you know more about what Dufferin Spotlight on Business is all about, which is a weekly show that features discussions and business leaders from around Dufferin County regarding their businesses and accomplishments. The achievements of small business owners largely go unnoticed, but it is our goal to recognize them, as these are the people who keep small communities like ours alive. In addition to this, we will highlight the advantages of shopping local, so be sure to check back each week to see the amazing things people are doing through their businesses. To learn more about what we do and other shows that we will be producing, be sure to check out dufferinspotlight.ca. Now, I hope you enjoy the rest of Dufferin Spotlight on Business.
To pick up on your comment about, yes, they could acquire native plants from somewhere else, that's something that we're also very concerned and passionate about, is the fact that the plants that we have are locally sourced, they're ethically grown or propagated. People are not digging them out of the wild, which has many different ramifications. Obviously, you're disturbing a natural environment, which is not a good thing. There's actually a list of certain species of native plants that are illegal to propagate because they're an endangered species. So you cannot legally propagate some of those because government agencies don't want those plants disturbed.
You know, another situation that arises with, say, a larger retailer is that, you know, they will sell a cedar, for instance, but their cedars are quite likely from BC or somewhere in the States. They're not selling cedars that are grown in Ontario. So there's a big difference, actually, between buying, say, an emerald cedar from BC and then planting an eastern white cedar that's been propagated in Ontario. That plant is I don't think those plants have great success a lot of the times because they die in people's yards. And that's not even to mention that these cedars from BC have a whole different community of insects that are associated with them that don't, you know, there's western species and eastern species, right?
Yeah.
Another aspect is some of the box stores, for example, are starting to sell native plants. And, you know, who knows where they're sourced from. But the issue is their focus is, to sell you something that they think is the flavor of the month type of thing, or the flavor of the week. So they will offer a guarantee. If that cedar or even a milkweed plant or something like that, if it dies, they will have a warranty that if the plant dies, they'll replace it for you. Well, a lot of times they don't replace it. They'll give you a credit so that, you can go and buy a bag of fertilizer or a screwdriver or whatever. So I guess what I'm saying is they don't have the same care about a quote-unquote native plant.
Yeah.
But they do see the value in trying to sell native plants to a consumer, because the consumer is realizing that they should be trying to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also gets people into the store. I mean, that's the whole
It's a marketing
point,
strategy.
right?
It essentially is a marketing strategy where they can afford to lose out on the plants. And who knows how much they're actually paying for the plants, or even if they're paying for the plants themselves to a degree. I mean, there's various different models that they could be going on. But that is wild. I mean, but it makes complete sense. I mean, that's, from a business perspective, it doesn't make complete sense from an environmental or the consumer, because, I mean, you're not getting what you want, and you're spending money needlessly at some place you probably maybe didn't even want to spend money at, but you're just like, okay, well, I wanted some plants, and there was a sale going on.
Well, like an impulse buy.
Exactly,
Yeah.
100%.
But we've accepted this as part of our business, and we're happy to share our knowledge. But when somebody comes here, say on a Saturday, and we actually have people, they'll be here for several hours.
Oh, yeah?
Just wandering around, because it's a pretty nice place just to hang out, for one thing. Some people actually bring their lunches. And, they bring their kids. So it's a commitment on our parts to talk about that. They usually have a lot of questions, and they're either super knowledgeable, they've done a lot of their research online or whatever, or they don't really know too much about native plants at all.
Yeah.
So in that situation, we can talk to one customer for like a good hour, right? And they might purchase like one plant, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just the nature of the business, and we feel that it's worth investing our time because we truly believe in what we do. So, we're constantly actually educating people and, perhaps making them aware of some things that they haven't been before. So
that's awesome. Because, I mean, we are truly lucky that you guys went to the consumer space instead of just wholesaling. Because, I mean, that knowledge isn't out there. And, I mean, most people wouldn't be able to get those questions answered. And we're very lucky, because if you guys were just wholesaling, that would be lost. So it's good. It's very fortunate, because, I mean, most people wouldn't do that. And, I mean, what the show is all about is highlighting customer service and knowledge and expertise. I mean, that's what separates local businesses from the competition. That's
For
how
sure.
you beat them.
Yeah.
That's really one of the only ways long term you can do it. And it's awesome that you guys are evidence of that. Like, you're a perfect example, like, in my mind, because retail is a tough business. I mean, I know there's a lot more to your business than just retail. I know that, like, I'm quite aware of, I don't know everything, but I mean, I'm quite aware there's more than just retail. But the retail business is hard, and especially when you're going up against big box stores. I don't need to tell you guys this, but it's awesome that you're using the skills that you have and the knowledge that you have to make it work. That's awesome, because, I mean, that gets lost on a lot of people now. It's more about just convenience and, making yourself feel better by telling yourself you bought a native plant than actually going out and getting a native plant. Like I said, like the marketing stuff. Like, it's annoying, but it's great that we have you guys as a resource. We're very lucky.
Well,
Very
and,
lucky.
and we certainly have repeat customers, and who come back, say, the following year to add more plants to their personal landscape. But they'll also come and say, hey, we've noticed so much more wildlife now in our yards. Like, we're seeing more butterflies, we're seeing more bees, and they share that with us, and we're like, yeah, that's great. And I think it's very satisfying for them to see that happening, and to see the direct positive results of the purchasing choices that they made. So we get some really passionate people coming here, and
That's
they're
awesome.
very excited about, well, they feel that they're making a difference, which they are, right?
Well, now that you mention it, I mean, again, it's easy to overlook things, but I don't notice as many butterflies as I used to when I was younger. I mean, I could just be missing it because maybe I'm not as outside as often as I should be, or as I used to be, but it definitely seems like there's less of that around now. And I mean, you don't notice it until, like, someone mentions it, but you're 100% right. Like, if you can bring some of that wildlife back in and more butterflies and things like that, that'd be great.
Well, not to be, all doom and gloom. Well, we gave a talk to the Orangeville Hort Club this week, and you've heard of World Wildlife Fund?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. So they do report every 2 years. It's called the Living Planet Report. So in 2018, that was the last report, there's been an almost 60% decline in the populations of like everything right across the board since 40 years ago. So mammals, insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds. Yeah.
And that's
so
us.
you're not imagining it, Josh.
Yeah, I wish I was. Now that like that's yeah, but
Yeah.
it's good that people like you are making it possible for people to help support the environment and help it get back to the way it used to be, and maybe make it better. Again, we're lucky. We're very lucky.
I might be aging myself a little bit, but getting back to your comment about noticing less butterflies, years ago, if you drove from Toronto, say, to Barrie, you'd be going up the 400, and by the time you got there, your windshield would be completely covered in bugs. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, that doesn't really happen anymore. So that, if you look at just those little things and you think back and you go, oh my gosh, I never thought of it, but you're right.
Yeah, you're right. There's definitely a difference over time. Like you said, you don't notice it until someone mentions it.
Well, there was a time after driving in the dark, like at night, because of the headlights, you'd have to use your windshield wipers to clean the bugs off your windshield.
That's an obvious difference, yeah.
Not to knock big box stores, but one of the other issues with native plants in big box stores, they're promoting it to people to buy these plants to help pollinators. And yet there's a systemic chemical, and by systemic that means it goes into the plant, it's not just sprayed on the plant. There's several actually, but they're called neonicotinoids. And studies have proven that these types of pesticides are toxic to bees. So in other words, if you're planting a flowering plant, the pollen and nectar that's being produced by that plant is tainted with these neonicotinoids and can be fatal to the pollinators that you're trying to help promote.
No, it's very true. And the problem is, though, if you were to ask somebody who worked at one of these stores if they knew where the plants came from, they probably couldn't answer that.
Nope.
And it's very important, actually, because we have had to drop a few suppliers. Actually, we do buy some plants, like we'll buy something bare root in the springtime, and then we grow them on. We don't start every single plant of our own from seed, but we've had to drop a few suppliers because neonicotinoids can be in various forms. They can spray, they can be what's called a soil drench. So some growers still use them, unfortunately. But no, that's a great point that Ian made, that a lot of people buy these plants thinking that they're doing a good thing, but it's actually being counterproductive because if the plants have been grown with this pesticide, it's detrimental.
And neonicotinoids are residual in the soil.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, they can persist for many years.
So probably doing more harm by bringing these plants into the environment because it kind of tricks the pollinators into thinking they're okay, and then it poisons them.
Yeah, it's the same pesticide they use on field crops, which there's now, going to be an incremental ban on. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize that, say, bedding plants, perennials, actually any plant, they can be grown with neonics. So yeah, just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, seriously, like, if you're going to be getting native plants, I mean, you're doing it for a reason, and that's to help the environment. So, I mean, you might as well do it properly. I mean, not just to make yourself feel good or whatever the thing is going to be. Like, you should do it for the reason that you actually want to do it for. So go to the people that actually know what they're talking about and actually can point you in the right direction. Because it's not the workers' fault, because, I mean, they're just there getting a job, and, I mean, they don't know. I mean, again, I'm going to have some sympathy for them because I was one of those people. I was hawking something I didn't know. But it's the guys at the head office that are the problem. But, I mean, at the ground level, like, really, it's important if you're going to be doing these things, not just to get something that's possibly going to be worse for the environment, even though, again, by all appearances, you look like you're doing the right thing. Like, that's horrible.
Native plants are becoming more popular with interest in sustainable landscapes and helping pollinators. Mainstream nurseries are getting into native plants, but they don't have the staff with the expertise to support the sales. Sourcing plants and seeds can be an issue, with some of them coming from the US and overseas. So, in other words, even though it's a particular plant that may be native to this area, if the seed or the plant is imported from somewhere abroad, again, you're not really solving the problem.
Yeah, and the seed too. I'm glad I'm talking to you guys because, I mean, you really have to think about these things. Like, I mean, you think like, okay, I got a seed, I'm able to start from scratch. No, that's not how it works apparently. So you should get native seeds as well.
Yeah, again, the plants that have evolved to that area. I mean, one plant that a lot of people have probably heard about is Scotch pine, which is not native to here. But Scotch pine is a plant that globally grows in many different climatic zones and everything else. So I'm just using that as a sort of a poster child. But the plants or seeds, as I mentioned, should be sourced from a local area. There are Ontario seed companies that offer what they call wildflower seed mixes, and wildflowers are, it's a little bit of another generic name for native plants when it comes to perennials. Those seeds, because of the supply and demand, there aren't enough seed producers producing native seed in Ontario, so they do bring that seed in, as I said, either from the States or even other countries.
Wow. So yeah. So I mean, your competition is literally coming from everywhere.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I mean, you have the big box stores, and then you have the overseas guys, and I mean, they're selling at big box stores, but I mean, they're also being sold other places as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can get a pack of wildflower seeds in probably the dollar store. I don't know. I'm just.
The other thing we find that some people will come in and say, "Oh, I saw that growing in my ditch," so they may go dig it out of the ditch. Which, I mean, that situation may be not totally detrimental, but that is a bit of our competition. But when you're trying to figure out what native plants to grow, that's what we tell people, is to look around and see what's growing in your area. But rather than digging it up in the wild, is to try and propagate it. If you want to maybe collect the seed from that plant and try and grow it, that's perfectly fine.
But removing from that environment isn't the best way of going about it. Like, it's better to go through a person that actually is making the environment for those plants to grow in naturally.
Well, yeah, and sometimes we have customers come to us and they'll say, yeah, so we dug up some plants and then we transplanted them into our place and they died. So, they're kind of frustrated. Then they eventually come to us because our stock is potted. There isn't that same, shock to the plant, right?
Oh, okay.
So, a lot of people, they're frustrated or they're surprised at the plant that they've just dug up. And then say they don't water it, and then the plant dies. So they kind of wonder why. But yeah. So I mean, I get it. People are always looking to save a bit of money. Yeah. But sometimes it's false economy, because you'll get better success rate if you buy a plant that's already been kind of conditioned to be transplanted.
Yeah. Exactly.
Another thing we find is people think that because it's a native plant, they don't have to look after it. But
this is true, yeah.
But any plant needs a certain amount of...
especially when they're young.
Yeah, they need a certain amount of nurturing to get started.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably be one of those people that think that, so I'm not going to laugh too hard, but yeah, when you say it, it does sound a little ridiculous. You still have to put in some care. Like, it definitely, like you said, especially when they're younger, you need to make sure it's nurtured, like 100%.
One other thing that I forgot about in terms of an advantage that we have here at the farm is a lot of the small trees that we have are in pots. So they might only be 2 feet high to 4 feet high, but people coming to the nursery are very encouraged by that, in that they can afford to buy 2 or 3 small trees, where a lot of the other commercial nurseries, where they can get something from us in the $20 to $30 range, they're in the 50 to 100 minimum and going up from there. So it just makes it more affordable. It makes it easier for people to
physically plant them.
Yeah, physically plant them and fit them in their car.
Yeah.
For the do-it-yourselfer.
It's true. I mean, sometimes like the size of the plant that people purchase is determined by the size of the vehicle that they're in.
100%.
And I just wanted to mention as well that one of the things that we try to do here are have display gardens. So if somebody wants to know what a plant looks like when it's mature, how big it gets, where it prefers to grow, we can actually take them and show them an example. So they see firsthand what that plant looks like when it's older and where it likes to grow. So.
Wow.
Which is something that they can't do in a
exactly
in a larger
No.
garden center.
I mean, I keep saying it, but like again, we're lucky to have you guys in the community because I mean, that's not everywhere. That's not.
No, and we have a large property, so we're always trying to add. So for instance, this year we have plans to put in a wildflower meadow, but the whole process, because a lot of people do have that interest in growing a meadow, but then they don't know, where to start. So we'll be able to show people right from, day one to a couple years from now when it's all mature, the different stages that it goes through. So.
Wow. They can't do that. They'll never be able to do that. Not in person, at least. They might be able to do some virtual reality thing down the line. Not where you actually get to touch and feel the plants and actually experience it.
Yeah.
Which is what you want. That's why you're doing stuff with nature, so you can experience it, not to watch it through a screen. Hi everyone, Josh here with another commercial break. So now that you know what the show is all about, let me tell you more about what our mission is with Dufferin Spotlight as a whole. We are looking to cover issues that do not get enough attention by the public, in non-divisive ways, with the hope of increasing awareness and moving discussions forward. In addition to this, with our content, we also aim to support those affected or are trying to solve these issues. There are a lot of issues we'd like to cover, which means a lot of shows. We already have a new show slated for this year, this one completely unrelated to business, but still involves the people of Dufferin. We've got a lot on the go, so be sure to follow Dufferin Spotlight on Facebook to keep up with the latest news. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode of Dufferin Spotlight on Business. So what are your most popular products or services?
At the moment, I would say any plants that, when people look up that plant, it's shown to support pollinators and in particular monarchs. As I mentioned, like monarchs, they're very front and center because of their declining numbers. So we sell a lot of milkweed and a lot of plants that typically provide nectar for them. We also sell edible plants. People are really starting to become more interested in their own little mini food forest. So popping in, a raspberry or a blueberry or a native choke cherry, that's super popular at the moment. People growing their own food.
True. I mean, I've seen some people trying to start some foraging groups and trying to get like edible plants. So I mean, it's of a similar note. So I can definitely see how it's gaining more popularity. So that makes sense.
And we get a lot of young families coming, and I think that they're trying to teach their children, like they're trying to give their children more of a connection with their food. And so they say, we're going to plant this raspberry and we're going to be able to pick. So, just trying to connect their kids with their food.
In nature too, I mean, especially here, it's a great experience for them as well. Like just, again, not enough connections with nature because, there are tons of kids that are hooked up to screens. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So are you working on any major projects or jobs?
One of the things we're getting involved with is, and it's just in its inception, I actually sit on the board of directors, is a group called the Ontario Native Plant Growers Association. So up until now, there's lots of plant growers and nursery people, but we're trying to put together sort of a collective voice for the native plant industry. We're trying to obviously increase awareness and also see how we can, up the supply chain, working with various growers to meet the demand of the native plant industry.
That's good because, I don't need to tell anybody, but because we've all seen what the supply chain is for the non-native species. And to be able to compete against that and help get the environment to where it needs to be, we need to be able to compete with them on that merit as well. So, increasing availability, getting more organization, that's great. That'll help a lot. And
I think within the native plant community, the growers, we're pretty good at, say, if we don't have an item, we'll send them to another nursery we know who does.
That's great.
We all kind of have our own little specialties, and we try to, work together and, partner.
Or if we don't have something, we'll try and source it from
True,
one of our
we can
other...
source it from another grower on behalf of a customer. We do that quite often.
Good, because that helps compete against some of these other plants that people are buying. The more quote-unquote mainstream plants that you see at the stores that aren't so great for the environment but look nice to certain people. So when you were younger, did you both think you'd be doing this?
This, we're going to let Ian answer most of these questions because, as I said, this was not my original path, but plants have been Ian's life since he was a little boy. So
wow,
he can.
To answer your question, not specifically, but I've been working in this industry since the early 1970s. I just kind of evolved into it and never looked back.
We're lucky to have that knowledge because, I mean, not everywhere is going to have what you guys are offering, have people that are passionate behind it, because you need to have that in this industry, I imagine, because it's easy to cut corners. It really is. And I mean, if you're not passionate, if you don't care about the main objective here, then you are going to cut those corners. I mean, that's what the big box guys do. And they're willing to sell you plants that are going to die just to have you buy a screwdriver in a month, which is ridiculous. But it makes sense business-wise. I mean, whatever. So did you have any role models or positive influences growing up?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I started working at a nursery eventually, but even before that, my next door neighbor was a graduate of the Ontario Agricultural College, which is now the University of Guelph. And he had a hobby greenhouse. So I'd wander over and, putter around in the greenhouse with him. And when he went away on, on business or holidays or whatever, he asked me to look after his greenhouse. So I would spend time in this greenhouse. And, as a kid, that was just awesome. I grew up in a rural area. It was a small group of houses at the north end of Scarborough and Markham that was completely surrounded by farmland. So I spent a lot of my time as a kid outside growing up.
I mean, to have the chance to be in a greenhouse too. I mean, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to be out in the rural area, which is a great advantage. I mean, I was lucky enough to take advantage of that, but a lot of people aren't able to. And the fact that you also had the additional experience of going in the greenhouse and actually being able to focus on all the different plants and what goes on there. I mean, rural areas are great and they have lots of plants and all that stuff, but you can get immersed in other things there. I mean, there's a lot of fun to be had out there. But when you're in the greenhouse, you're focusing on the plants and you'll gain an appreciation for them. So that makes complete sense how that has influenced your life. Because, I mean, where else are you going to get that?
That's right. You start something, you watch it grow, and in a greenhouse situation, you're monitoring it on a very close one-to-one basis.
Yeah. So where was your first job and what did you do?
Well, my first job was when I was 14. I was working at Wheel and Cullen Nurseries. I think my mother probably prodded me to start there. So we started during March break. And I think the first time we potted up 10,000 roses that week because everything would come in bare root. And that's what we did for the week during March break. The nursery business was very different then. And most of the shrubs and small trees were only planted in the spring and they were bare root. Whereas now in a retail nursery, everything is potted or in some sort of container because they can't deal with that very seasonal aspect of the business. One of the other jobs I had there sort of after March break and on weekends was wrapping bare root shrubs for customers. And we'd wrap them in paper and straw and they would take them home and plant them. And actually, back in those days, I could identify by shrubs, even without leaves on, by their roots.
Really?
and wrap them up and send them off. So that's kind of a life skill that I don't use as much these days.
Wow. You must have really known the product then. I mean, yeah. Wow. I would never be able to do that ever.
I think it's a much different scenario now, and partly because, it's partly driven by consumers. They want plants. You can compare it to, say, produce and stuff. People want products way outside their natural window when they're available. So with retailers, they offer things earlier and earlier, later and later.
Yep.
So with having plants in containers, and these plants, when it's not, say, the specific growing season here, they can bring in plants from elsewhere where they've been able to be started earlier, right? So they're just able to offer products during a much larger window these days. And much the same as produce, really. People were used to buying veggies, fruits more in season, right? But that doesn't happen anymore because of the whole transportation thing and the fact that, it's so much easier in a way to get produce in that's not in season. There are some similarities with the plant business as well.
That makes complete sense too. So, I mean, it wouldn't be readily apparent to me, but when you explain it like that, it makes complete sense.
It's more of a global economy and instant gratification.
Yeah, exactly. It's a consequence of our society right now. unfortunately. So would you like to discuss your education?
I guess I'll answer that one. So after finishing high school, I took a little bit of time off and traveled to Australia. But while I was still in high school, in 1976, I started my landscape company called Enviroscape Incorporated with my brother, and at the time it was a landscape design and construction company. Since then, my brother's retired from the business, but I still keep Enviroscape running as a side business from Not So Hollow Farm. I primarily focus on consulting at this point. I'm not doing, as much of the construction as I used to.
That's good though, because you're still making your knowledge available, and that's really what's important. You can get hands and stuff like that. It's still good to have knowledgeable hands, no doubt. But to have someone that actually knows what they're doing, that has the experience, that has the knowledge, that has the passion, to be able to offer that and people to be able to take advantage of that is great. It's great.
There aren't too many 17-year-olds who start their own businesses.
So when I returned from Australia, I enrolled in the landscape architecture program at the University of Toronto. So I have a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture.
Awesome.
Do you want to tell Josh how you got in? Very quickly?
Yeah.
It's kind of an unusual story.
So I actually applied late to the program.
Yeah.
So they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's full for this year." And there was another one of my classmates that was in the same situation, because with landscape architecture, they actually had a drafting table for each person at U of T. So there were, in design studio, there was only 40 drafting tables or 40 desks, and there was 42 of us that year. They said, "Well, I'm sorry, you can't come in." So I said, "Well, what if we figure out a way of making it work?" And they said, "Oh, yeah. So I had a pickup truck at the time, because I had my landscaping business at that time. So my friend James and I went to a used lumber yard and bought a bunch of used lumber. And the design studio was on the 5th floor at 230 College Street. So it was like, I don't know, at least 15-foot ceilings, if not higher. So we built a mezzanine over 2 of the other desks and put our desks up there. So on Monday morning, when class came in, we were sitting up on our desks up above everybody looking down. So the faculty had to, call an emergency meeting and say, "What are we going to do with these guys? We can't get rid of them now." So that's how I got into landscape architecture at U of T.
That is determination.
Yeah.
I hear stories about people having to go to and fight. Like nowadays, it's people fighting with administration. You guys solved the problem. You guys just took it upon yourselves. You solved the problem, and it worked.
Yeah.
That is that's a unique solution.
I don't know
awesome.
if that would fly these days.
It would. It would.
They'd get the building inspectors in there.
No, but we made sure that we weren't in the fire lanes and all that stuff, so we complied. Anyways.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Hi everyone, this is Josh here with the third commercial break. So now that you know about the show and the overall mission of Dufferin Spotlight, you're probably asking yourself how we're going to pay for it all. We will provide advertising opportunities to interested parties, primarily local businesses, so they can reach people just like you. We prefer working with small local businesses, as that's what we are, and it stops us from getting too reliant on big corporations who already have enough influence over the media landscape. If you are an organization who is interested in working with Dufferin Spotlight to promote your products or services, please reach out to us through our website, dufferinspotlight.ca, so we can bring your community to you. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode of Dufferin Spotlight on Business. So Vicky, if you don't mind, can you tell us about your first job?
My first job was being a hostess in a restaurant.
Yeah?
And I subsequently went on to various restaurants being a hostess. But I had always kind of liked to bake at home, not so much cooking at that time. So I thought perhaps I should pursue that. So I ended up moving to Toronto, getting a job through a program at the time. It was called Futures. It was kind of like a work co-op for 3 months. So I ended up working at a catering company, and then I worked my way up, and I ended up being there for a while, and I ended up being their head pastry chef there.
Oh, wow.
So I guess I've always dealt with people and consumers, customers through the jobs that I've had. So I am used to dealing with the public, so it does kind of complement what we do here. I have this hospitality thing like deeply rooted inside of me, and I always want to basically provide the best experience for people.
It's amazing that you guys were able to transfer over from wholesale to customer retail. Because I mean, a bunch of companies fail at doing that. But without those skills, without the customer service skills and being able to interact with people, and then also conveying your knowledge and expertise in an appropriate way, if you didn't have that, it wouldn't work. I mean, again, there's so many businesses that fail from trying to translate from wholesale to consumer. It just doesn't work for a lot of them.
Yeah, I don't think everyone is cut out to dealing with the public, but in our other business, in Ian's business and Varscape, he's been dealing with clients ever since he was 16, so
Yeah, it's good that you both have it then, because it's hard. But you're right, if you have all that experience dealing with people, that is great, especially at a young age. So did you start, buy, or inherit this business?
Well, actually, Vicki and I started Not So Hollow Farm together in 2003 here at the farm. And I guess it was primarily because of my background as a landscape architect and knowing the industry and shopping at other nurseries and things like that, that we saw a need for expanding, into a native plant nursery. And even that many years ago, it's not that long ago, but there are a lot more native plant nurseries now, and native plants are becoming more and more mainstream to the public. But as I said, we just saw that as a need in the industry at that time.
That's great. I mean, 17 years now. That's great. That's success. That's awesome. You see some changes in this industry over that time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And more people getting into it because more people are seeing the value of it. Like, you saw the need. You guys were early movers. That's awesome. But then you're going to see people fall in your footsteps, and then people try to cut corners, like as you've seen. And then the big box stores try to enter the market and do it with varying success, with however you want to define success. But you definitely would see some changes. But that's amazing. 17 years, that's great.
Yeah, but again, it's evolved. As we said before, we were primarily wholesaling to conservation authorities and landscape contractors and things like that. But as GQ Public has evolved as well, we opened it up to the public to offer something that's not offered elsewhere.
That's awesome. So what was your biggest challenge in starting this business?
Probably the biggest one was just getting the word out. So these days, people are more used to searching for items on the internet. So our website has made a huge difference.
That's good.
People can search a specific native plant, and quite often the farm name will pop up. So people come here and they tell us that's how they found us. And people actually come here from quite a few distances. We've had people come from North Bay, coming down, looking for a specific plant, Niagara, Kingston, all over really. So it's kind of an interesting thing about our business. People actually come and they make the day out of it. They'll go for lunch in the area. They'll actually stay overnight sometimes at an Airbnb or a B&B. So if they've come from a ways away, they just decide to make the day of it and go see the local attractions, local sites, as well as coming and buying a few plants. So
that's awesome.
It is amazing, though, that we can have people from a couple concessions over come to the farm and say, "Oh, we never even knew you were here."
Yeah, that's the other thing about trying to get our names out there. We do have some signage now, which helps people. They'll see our signs. Maybe they pass them all the time, and then eventually their curiosity gets to them, and then they actually come in.
Yeah.
And then they say, "Oh, this is what you guys do." They've seen our signs, or our signs are super helpful to people actually trying to find us, because I guess that's another challenge for us, is we don't think we're too far off the beaten track. But for some people who say are not used to coming to a rural area, like we're in between two fairly major highways, but for some people who say are not used to traveling outside an urban area or whatever, we always say, look us up on Google Maps, but we do get people getting lost. So our signage does help with that.
Google Maps literally took me exactly where I needed to be to get here. It's not always so lucky with other people. So, I mean, if you guys need to find it, Google Maps is a great resource, especially for your guys.
Well, we specifically mentioned to people that they should only use Google Maps, because if people have, say, a GPS system in their vehicle, it actually is quite common for people to be sent quite a bit further south of us or west of us. And then, they end up getting frustrated. And I mean, at least they see more of the countryside.
Especially if you type in the street address, sometimes you'll get taken somewhere else. But if you type in Not So Hollow Farm in Google Maps, it'll bring you right here.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's extremely convenient in that regard, so that's awesome. And I mean, the fact that your website seems like it's so well designed that sometimes when they just type in the name of the
They
plant,
do a search, yeah.
yeah, and it brings you to your website. That's really good because I mean, not a lot of people's websites are that optimized for search engines. Like that's great. Yeah, getting your name out when you first start is extremely hard, especially when you're not in a larger area like a city or a town, and then if you don't have a retail location with signage and things like that, people aren't going to know about you. And I mean, I can definitely relate to people being just a couple concessions over and not actually knowing you exist or they don't know what you do, because I've been in an area for like just my parents' business. Like they've been in their area for over 15 years now, and there are businesses just located just around the corner that have been there longer than I've been around, that nobody knows exist. Like I've asked people and they don't know these businesses exist, and they've been around plenty of time. So it doesn't surprise me that can happen out here.
Yeah, that's probably our biggest challenge. I mean, I still don't think we're mainstream, so people are constantly finding us and discovering us, but we just need more of those people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, we are selling local indigenous plants, so it's not something we can sell on Amazon or whatever.
Yeah.
Even in terms of advertising, where would you advertise when you're literally trying to get local people to buy local plants?
Yeah, that's true.
We do get asked quite often if we deliver, and it's not something that we're really set up for. We have a pretty small staff,
Yeah.
and if Ian or myself are out delivering, we're not, focusing our efforts on our business. So, and it's, we're talking live material here. So it's not like we can call up Pure later and say, please, can you come and deliver some plants to a customer? It doesn't work that way. So it's pretty time sensitive stuff.
And we do deliveries for larger orders, but if it's just a couple of plants, it's actually cost prohibitive.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And,
it is. It's much more economical for a customer if they don't live really that far away to just come and get the plants.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we're seeing all kinds of businesses, like we're even seeing food service. Like, delivery is a tough business. I mean, that's why you have businesses pretty much specializing in it now for various different products. So, I mean, you guys should specialize in what you're good at, and they should specialize at what they're good at. And if the service doesn't make sense, like it doesn't with plant material, and again, pretty much you're trying to sell to everyone as local, and you're benefited from coming out here, like really, than just getting something shipped to you, because they're gaining the knowledge of your expertise. They get to meet you guys, and they get to put a face behind everything versus, just because we know all the connection we have to the products we buy from Amazon. We don't have a connection to the people that actually sell it to us. We have a connection with Amazon. And that would be the similar situation if you guys weren't actually meeting with the people and interacting with them.
And it's part of the experience.
Exactly. 100%. And that's what separates you guys from the competition. Hi, everyone. This is our last commercial break. Thank you all for listening so far, and I hope you've enjoyed it. To keep up with everything that Dufferin Spotlight is doing, you should follow us on Facebook and YouTube. You can find other episodes of Dufferin Spotlight on Business by looking us up on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, in addition to our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Of course, the best way to see all of our stuff is to check out our website, dufferinspotlight.ca. If we're not already on your preferred platform, let us know through our website and we'll do our best to get on it. That's it for commercials, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Dufferin Spotlight on Business. So do you have any advice for those starting their own business?
If you're starting a business, you obviously have to have a passion for what you want to do. That being said, I think right from the get-go, it has to be treated as a business and not just a hobby or something that you like that you may or may not make money doing.
100%. Because, I mean, if you don't take it seriously, first of all, other people aren't going to take you seriously. Your customers won't. And you're not going to give it the proper attention it deserves. I mean, a business requires a lot of attention, especially if you want to be successful, and especially if you want it to last the length of time that you guys have. Like, for 15 plus years, a lot of businesses don't make it that long. So, I mean, you need to actually treat it seriously. I mean, there's plenty of people that do have their side hustles, like younger people are doing it because they need to supplement their income because they're not making enough, or because they want to be able to have some money in the bank. But generally, those don't turn into real businesses. Again, it's just supplemental income. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to make a real business, you have to dedicate real time to it and treat it as such.
It's also hard, though, sometimes to look at your business objectively, actually, because, and I'm sure that, like most business people have that, but, realize what your strengths, what your weaknesses are, and maybe you can't do everything. We have a broad scope of interest, so sometimes, overthinking the years that we've had the business. I mean, we do have these little side ventures and stuff, but we're passionate about these things, but they're not necessarily areas that we should be focusing on. And sometimes it's hard to look at your business through that type of lens because you're too close to it. So I don't know how that's accomplished, but from an advice perspective, just knowing what you're good at and maybe, focusing on that and try not to get too sidetracked.
Yeah, because I mean, it's very easy to start getting into all these different avenues, especially if you're trying to make money and try to access more customers and trying to cater to your customers as well. Because maybe your customers are asking for things that you try to provide. You get into it and you're like, this isn't good for anybody. Like, I'd be better off if I focused on the main business, which is why people love coming here and love dealing with me, is because of the main business. So we should focus on that. But it is very easy to get caught off because everyone has different passions too. You can have more than one passion. And it's very hard to choose sometimes. So, I mean, that's completely understandable, and that is good advice because, I mean, it's easy to get off track or try to expand into too many different areas.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's a relatively easy thing to fix as long as you don't put in too much, generally, money into it. That's usually a problem. So are you currently hiring?
This is actually the first year that I don't have ads out there for staff, and that's because we're fortunate that we have returning staff.
Awesome. So do you have any plans for expansion?
So our two biggest customer demographics are young families or boomers, and not so much in the middle.
Oh, yeah?
Because we find that, say, a younger family, they're usually a little bit more environmentally conscious, I would say.
Makes sense.
They're planting for their kids' future. But then the boomers, they have, say, a little bit more disposable income. They have the time as well to do a bit of gardening. So they're also buyers.
Yeah.
So whatever the demands are that are kind of dictated by them, say whether it's getting in more edible plants, more plants that are going to save the world type thing, then that's like we're going to change in order to meet those needs. And as I said, more display areas here, probably carrying more variety of some plants and less of some plants that don't seem to be selling. It's a bit tricky trying to predict what will sell because we have to make these decisions last year. Right? When we pre-order some plants or when I start seed.
Yeah.
So it's not like a snap of the fingers. We can switch gears. So yeah, basically, we try to get a feeling of what things people will be looking for, and then we'll change. Because we didn't start off as retail, that there's still some, I think, things that we can do. We have a lot of signage in the nursery. It's sort of a self-guided tour, but I think there's more things that we could do in that area to make people's buying experience a bit better. I think there's always room for improvement.
That's great. I mean, you guys have already come up with some pretty great ideas from the retail aspect. So, I mean, just putting those little finishing touches on things like that, that's great. That's only, like you said, that's going to improve. But I mean, just given what you guys have already laid down, you have a great foundation. Like that's awesome.
I think our focus now is on trying to carry things that aren't available elsewhere,
Right.
and if something is easily available and maybe at a lesser cost, then we're concentrating less on that.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Because I mean, that creates new opportunities. And I mean, that brings more people to you guys.
Right.
Because they can't get it anywhere else. So
That's right.
very smart. They're going to get something they want versus, the big box thing just bothers me. It's like you're selling them something that it's going to break just so they come back and spend more money. Where at least, again, when they're coming with you guys, you're carrying stuff and you're carrying new stuff because people are going to want it and it's actually going to work. So what would you consider to be your biggest challenge in the years ahead?
For us, it is a pretty labor-intensive, time-intensive business. So for us, I think one of the challenges for the future is to try to get a little bit more free time.
Yeah.
We work 6 days a week. There's always something to do here.
Yeah.
So yeah, just trying to find a balance for us. We live in a beautiful spot, but sometimes we're way too busy just to, sit down and enjoy it. So
100%. Yeah, you got to take advantage of that. That's what you guys work for too, is to be able to take some free time for yourselves. That's part of it. But another thing I'm thinking of is just because, just the nature of your business is the environmental impacts and things like that will have effects for you guys. So, I mean, that will be a challenge in having to work your way around that. The environment's an issue for everybody, but when you're growing stuff and it affects your season and things like that, that's a huge impact on the business too. I mean, it's a little bit more of a long-term thing, but it's a reality and people need to acknowledge it. Like, we need to do more things to help our environment out, like you get native plants to help the species and be more environmentally friendly.
Sure. I mean, extreme weather events seem to be more common these days. So periods of drought or periods of extreme wet conditions, that can also be challenging. So yeah, just being able to adapt to those, and it seems that going forward they might be more frequent.
So are you looking forward to anything in the near future?
Well, we always look forward to spring.
Yeah, of course.
We love, just love seeing everything emerge, and then we get caught up with that passion too about growing, and then all of our customers, we share in their excitement and their passion. So that's like the near future, since we're just on the cusp of spring. But yeah, we always look forward to the new growing season.
Great. I mean, that's when the weather gets nice again.
It's interesting, how people react to how the winter was, because you start getting phone calls or emails, when are you open? When can I come and get plants? So that's always a fun time.
Yeah, we're ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Bring on spring.
Awesome.
Definitely.
So before we wrap it up, is there anything else you'd like to mention, or would you like to say what is the best way to contact you?
I would say the best way to contact us is through our website. The website is www.notsohollowfarm.ca.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for
You're very welcome.
letting
Thanks,
us on
Josh.
your show. It's great.
All right, everybody. That's it for this episode of Dufferin Spotlight on Business, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Vicky and Ian for taking the time to help us out with our show, and for those of you who listened. To find out more about Not So Hollow Farm and to keep up with everything that they are doing, follow them on Facebook or check out their website, notsohollowfarm.ca. If you would like to learn more about the people and businesses who make Dufferin what it is, be sure to check back every Tuesday for new episodes. The easiest way to do this is to follow or subscribe to our show wherever you prefer to listen. We are currently available on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, in addition to Facebook and YouTube. Of course, you can find all of our episodes and more on our website, dufferinspotlight.ca. If there's anywhere else you'd like to see us, please let us know through our website, and we'll do our best to get on it. If you haven't had a chance to check out our last episode, it's with Jennifer Weaver of Party Safari. And through Party Safari, Jennifer introduces groups of all ages to a wide variety of critters with the goal of increasing compassion towards all animals. I know we can't take full advantage of Party Safari's great services right now, but we should definitely keep up with everything that they're doing on Instagram, Facebook, and their website, partysafari.ca. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, get to know your community and shop local.